You black women should feel lucky you even married into this family, Officer Daniel Reed said quietly, his voice thick with contempt. If it weren't for my cousin, you'd still be living in one of the neighborhoods we patrol every night. Ethan Walker heard that, and he didn't correct him. Ethan Walker, Lena's husband of 10 years, the man who once told her he loved how smart she was, how calm she was, how different she was from everyone else, simply sat there in his expensive suit and smiled like Daniel had just told a harmless joke. That was the moment everyone in the courtroom understood something important about Lena Walker. She was alone. Lena Walker, a 8-year-old black woman and financial data analyst, stood at the defense table while 3 white people, her husband, his cousin the police officer, and the young woman now wearing her husband's ring, sat together like a team that had already won. Daniel Reed took the witness stand. He did not look at Lena when he raised his right hand to swear to tell the truth. But when he sat down, he looked directly at the judge, then at the jury box, then finally at Lena, with a small smile that never reached his eyes. Officer Reed, Ethan's lawyer said, "How long have you known the defendant, Lena Walker?" "About 10 years," Daniel replied. "Since she married my cousin. And during those 10 years, have you ever been called to their home for domestic disturbance calls?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, twice." Lena's attorney immediately stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Those calls did not result in any arrest." "Sustained," the judge said. "The jury will disregard the implication. Stick to facts, officer." Daniel nodded politely. "Yes, Your Honor. Just facts." He paused, then added, "Both times I responded, Mrs. Walker was extremely aggressive, yelling, throwing things. My cousin was trying to calm her down." Lena's attorney leaned toward her and whispered, "That's not what the report said. He's changing the story." But Lena already knew that. Ethan sat at his table, not looking at her. Claire, his new fiancée, looked directly at Lena and shook her head slowly, as if she were disappointed in her. The lawyer continued, "Officer Reed, based on your professional experience, did you feel Mr. Ethan Walker was in danger in that household?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes, I did." That single sentence landed in the room like a stone. Lena's attorney stood again. "Officer Reed, are you aware that the second call report stated there was no evidence of violence, and that my client was the one who called because she believed Mr. Walker was intoxicated and threatening her?" Daniel shrugged slightly. "People say a lot of things when we show up. We make judgment calls based on what we see." "And what did you see?" the attorney asked. Daniel looked straight at Lena when he answered. "I saw a man trying to hold his marriage together and a woman who was out of control." Claire let out a quiet laugh. Not loud, but loud enough. The judge looked down at Lena. "Mrs. Walker, you are also being accused of transferring funds from a joint account into a private account 6 months ago. Do you deny this?" Lena spoke for the first time since the hearing began. "No, Your Honor. I transferred the money." Ethan's lawyer smiled immediately. "And that money has not been returned, correct?" "That money," Lena said calmly, "was money I earned from my consulting work. It was deposited into a joint account without my permission." Ethan finally spoke. "That's not how marriage works, Lena. There is no your money and my money," Claire added softly. "Well, there is when only one person actually builds something." Some people in the courtroom chuckled quietly. Lena's attorney looked frustrated. "Your Honor, my client contributed financially to the household for years." Ethan's lawyer interrupted. "Mr. Walker built a company. Mrs. Walker worked from home on a laptop. Let's not pretend these are equal contributions." Daniel added from the stand. "My cousin worked 80-hour weeks. He built everything he has. Everyone in this room knows that." Then he looked directly at Lena again and said, "Some people just marry into success." That one was not even disguised as testimony. That was personal. The judge cleared his throat. "That's enough commentary, officer." But the damage was already done. The room had shifted. People were no longer looking at Lena like an equal party in a divorce. They were looking at her like a problem, like a mistake Ethan had made and was now correcting. Then came the settlement discussion. Ethan's lawyer stood and spoke clearly, confidently. My client is offering a very generous settlement, $50,000, full ownership of the vehicle currently used by Mrs. Walker, and a mutual waiver of all undisclosed assets. In return, Mrs. Walker gives up any claim to the marital home, the business, retirement accounts, and all future business profits. Lena's attorney whispered urgently, "This is a bad deal. This is a very bad deal." From the other table, Claire said quietly but clearly, "It's more than fair." Daniel added, "Honestly, it's more than most people would offer." Ethan leaned forward, looking directly at Lena now. "Just sign it, Lena. Let's not make this uglier than it already is." The judge looked at Lena. "Mrs. Walker, do you understand that by signing this agreement, you are also agreeing to the mutual waiver clause? Any asset not listed here on either side cannot be claimed later. This is final." Lena looked at the paper, then she looked at Ethan, then at Daniel, then at Claire. 3 people, 1 family, 1 team. Then she picked up the pen. Her attorney whispered, "Lena, please." Daniel folded his arms and watched. Claire smiled. Ethan said quietly, "This is the part where you do the smart thing for once." Lena signed her name. The sound of the pen moving across paper was very small, but in Ethan's mind, it sounded like a victory. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. Daniel shook his head and muttered, "Smartest decision she's ever made." Claire squeezed Ethan's arm and whispered, "Now we can finally start our life." The judge signed the order and lifted the gavel. Divorce granted. The gavel struck, and everyone in the room believed Lena Walker had just been humiliated, defeated, and erased from the Walker family. No one in that courtroom, not Ethan, not Claire, not Officer Daniel Reed, understood one simple thing. Lena Walker had not just signed a divorce settlement. She had just set a trap. Ethan Walker was still smiling when Lena signed the paper. He didn't even try to hide it now. The moment the judge left the bench and people began to stand, Ethan leaned back in his chair like a man who had just finished a long negotiation and gotten exactly what he wanted. Claire Whitmore, his fiancée, immediately wrapped her arm around his and kissed him on the cheek right there in the courtroom. "I'm proud of you," Claire said softly, but not softly enough. "You handled that perfectly." Officer Daniel Reed walked over, loosening his tie slightly, the tension of the courtroom already gone from his face. Now he looked relaxed, almost cheerful. "Family dinner tonight?" Daniel asked Ethan. Ethan smirked. "Yeah. My mom wants to celebrate. She said to invite you." Daniel nodded toward Lena's empty chair. "Guess there's an extra seat now." The 3 of them laughed quietly together. Across the room, Lena was placing the signed documents into a thin manila folder. Her attorney, Mark Feldman, was still standing beside her, looking like a man who had just watched someone walk into a burning building and calmly close the door behind them. "Lena," Mark said, lowering his voice, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you sign that because you're scared of them, or because you know something I don't?" Lena closed the folder and looked at him. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she said, very calmly, "Do you remember what you told me 3 months ago, Mr. Feldman?" He frowned slightly. "I tell my clients a lot of things." "You told me court isn't about truth," Lena said. "It's about what you can prove." Mark stared at her for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. "Yes, that sounds like something I would say." Lena picked up her bag. "I can prove what I need to prove, just not in this courtroom." Before he could ask another question, Ethan walked over and stopped a few feet away from them. "Mark," Ethan said politely, "I just want to say there are no hard feelings. This is just business. These things happen." Mark didn't smile. "Divorce isn't supposed to look like a hostile takeover, Ethan." Ethan shrugged. "You protect your client. I protect my future." Claire stepped forward, smiling in that polished way she had practiced in mirrors and restaurant windows. "Lena, I really do hope you land on your feet. Starting over at your age must be terrifying." Mark opened his mouth. but Lena gently touched his arm, stopping him. She looked at Claire. "You should be careful with the house," Lena said calmly. "The upstairs shower leaks when the temperature drops. Ethan never fixed it." Claire blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. Then Lena looked at Ethan. "And you might want to refinance again before the end of the year. Your interest rate is going to hurt you." Ethan's expression changed slightly. "I think I can manage my own finances." Lena nodded once. "I'm sure you think you can." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low again. "You got more than I expected, Lena. 50,000 for 10 years? That's not bad." Lena looked at him for a long moment. "Keep the uniform clean, Officer Reed," she said quietly. "You'll want to look respectable for what comes next." Daniel frowned. What's that supposed to mean? But Lena had already turned and started walking toward the courtroom doors. Behind her, she could hear Claire whisper, "God, she's so dramatic," followed by Ethan's quiet laugh. Lena pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped into the hallway again. This time, the hallway felt different. Not like a place where she had lost something, like a place she had just left on purpose. At the far end of the hallway, near a row of hard plastic chairs and a vending machine that hummed loudly, an older man stood waiting. He wore a dark suit that was a little out of date and held a brown envelope under his arm. This was Samuel Carter. Samuel Carter was a retired federal prosecutor in his 70s, a man who had spent most of his career putting financial criminals and corrupt officials in prison. His hair was completely gray now, and he walked with a slight limp, but his eyes were still sharp and observant. He had been sitting in the back of the courtroom the entire time. Lena walked toward him, her heels echoing softly on the tile floor. "Well?" Samuel asked. Lena held up the signed document. He insisted on the mutual waiver. Samuel nodded slowly. "Good. That's what we needed." They began walking down the hallway together. "Did Daniel testify the way we expected?" Samuel asked. "Yes," Lena said. "Aggressive, confident. He thinks he helped his cousin win." Samuel gave a small, humorless smile. "Men like Daniel always think they're the smartest man in the room. That's why cases like this take time. You have to let them talk. Let them write their own story. Let them believe it." They reached the courthouse exit, but Lena stopped before the doors. "Is Michael ready?" she asked. Samuel looked at her for a moment before answering. "My son has been ready for 3 years." Michael Carter was Samuel Carter's son, a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. 20 years ago, Michael had been a sick child in a hospital bed, while his father tried to figure out how to pay for a surgery they couldn't afford. Lena, who at the time was just a young analyst working her first real job, had paid the hospital bill anonymously after Samuel had helped her with a legal issue years earlier. Samuel had found out later. He never forgot. "Michael and his team have been building the case," Samuel continued. "Your ex-husband's company, his loans, his offshore accounts, and Daniel Reed's department. Internal Affairs is already involved on the police side. We just needed one thing. The waiver," Lena said. Samuel nodded. "The waiver." Lena looked down at the envelope in his hands. "Is that everything?" Samuel handed it to her. Copies of the financial reports, shell companies, property records, and the preliminary FBI timeline. "Once Ethan signs the next set of documents at the acquisition meeting, it's over." Lena took the envelope but didn't open it yet. Outside, through the glass doors, she could see Ethan, Claire, and Daniel standing together on the courthouse steps, laughing, talking, celebrating like they had just won a championship game. Claire was holding Ethan's arm with both hands now. Daniel was saying something that made both of them laugh. "They look happy," Samuel said quietly. Lena watched them for a long moment. "They think the worst thing that could happen to them already happened," she said. "They think the divorce was the battle." Samuel nodded. "Most people can't imagine a war when they think they've already won a fight." Lena finally pushed the courthouse doors open and stepped outside into the cold afternoon air. Ethan saw her and smirked. Daniel shook his head slightly, like he was looking at someone who just didn't understand how the world worked. Claire looked at Lena the way people look at strangers they will never have to see again. None of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, and none of them noticed the man sitting inside it, watching the courthouse steps through a camera lens. Special Agent Michael Carter lowered the camera slowly and spoke quietly into his phone. "Yeah," he said. He signed the waiver. He listened for a moment, then looked back at Ethan Walker, Officer Daniel Reed, and Claire Whitmore standing together in the sunlight, laughing. "They have no idea," Michael said. "We're ready when you are." Michael Carter had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous criminals did not look like criminals. They looked like businessmen in tailored suits, police officers with perfect service records, and families with the right last names. From inside the black sedan across the street, Michael watched Ethan Walker shake hands with Officer Daniel Reed and kiss Claire Whitmore on the cheek like a man who believed the future was finally his. Michael Carter was 38 years old, a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He had spent the last 12 years investigating fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and public corruption. He had seen greedy men, desperate men, violent men, but the most predictable ones were always the arrogant ones, the ones who believed they were too smart to get caught. He lifted his phone again. "He signed the waiver," Michael said. "Yes, mutual waiver, undisclosed assets, exactly like we planned." He listened for a moment, then nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. "Okay," he said. "Then we moved to phase 2. He hung up, started the engine, but didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he watched Lena Walker step out of the courthouse beside his father, Samuel Carter. 20 years ago, Michael had been a skinny kid in a hospital bed, listening to his parents whisper in the hallway about money they didn't have. He remembered the sound of his mother crying quietly at night because the insurance wouldn't cover the surgery. He remembered his father sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, staring at numbers that refused to work. And he remembered the day his father came into the hospital room and said, "Someone paid for it. We don't know who yet, but the surgery is scheduled." Years later, he found out it was Lena Walker. She had been young then, just starting her career. Not rich, not powerful. She had just helped because she could. Michael put the car into drive. Some debts you don't repay with money. You repay them with time, with loyalty, with justice. Across town, Ethan Walker was still celebrating. He, Claire, and Daniel sat in a private room at an expensive steakhouse, the kind of place with dark wood walls, low lighting, and waiters who addressed Ethan as Mr. Walker, like they had known him for years. A bottle of red wine sat open on the table. Claire had her hand on Ethan's arm again, her ring flashing every time she moved. "To new beginnings," Claire said, raising her glass. "To freedom," Ethan replied. Daniel lifted his glass last. "To family," he said, "and to cleaning up mistakes." They clinked glasses. Ethan leaned back in his chair, relaxed in a way he hadn't felt in years. "You know what the best part is?" he said. "She didn't fight. Not really. No forensic audit. No business valuation. Nothing. She just signed." Daniel smirked. "Some people know when they're outmatched." Claire took a sip of wine. "I still don't understand why you were ever worried about her. She doesn't look like someone who could take anything from you." Ethan smiled, but there was a small flicker of something behind it. "You don't know Lena like I do. She's quiet. She watches everything. That used to make me nervous." Daniel laughed. "You watch too many movies. She's a data analyst, not a criminal mastermind." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're probably right." Claire leaned closer to Ethan. "So, when do we tell everyone about the acquisition?" Ethan's smile returned, bigger this time. "Next week. The engagement party. Investors, city council, a few people from the department. I want it to be big. I want people to see it. The divorce, the acquisition, the engagement, all in the same month. It makes me look stable, successful, like everything is moving forward." Daniel nodded approvingly. "Optics matter," Claire laughed. Optics? I just want the photos to look amazing. Ethan raised his glass again. By this time next month, I'll have sold the company, cleared the debt, and stepped into the new firm as a partner. Fresh start. New house, new marriage, new life. Daniel added. And I'll have my promotion. Sergeant Reed sounds pretty good, doesn't it? They clinked glasses again. None of them noticed the man sitting alone at the bar, quietly eating his dinner, occasionally glancing at his phone. Michael Carter didn't look at them directly. He didn't need to. He had already memorized their faces from surveillance photos, driver's license records, and internal files. He opened a secure messaging app and typed a short message. Dinner meeting confirmed. Acquisition announcement scheduled for engagement party next Friday. Reed promotion tied to same event. Financial pressure on Walker increasing. He needs the deal. A reply came a minute later. Good. Let him think it's a celebration. Michael typed back. It will be. He put the phone away and finished his coffee. At the same time, across the city, Lena sat in a quiet office with Samuel Carter. The office was small, filled with old law books, framed certificates, and a coffee maker that looked older than most of the buildings downtown. Samuel spread several documents across the desk, financial statements, property records, corporate filings. Ethan's company is in worse shape than he thinks, Samuel said. Loans stacked on top of loans. He's been moving money between accounts to keep the business looking solvent. Lena studied the papers. And the investors? Most of them are retirement funds, Samuel said. Teachers, city workers, small unions. If the company collapses, they lose everything. Lena was quiet for a long moment. He knows, she said finally. He knows the numbers. He just thinks he'll sell the company before anyone finds out. Samuel nodded. That's exactly what he's trying to do. He thinks a bigger firm will buy him out, absorb the debt, and keep him on as an executive. Lena closed the folder slowly. Then we let him sell. Samuel looked at her. You're sure? Yes, Lena said. We let him sell. We let him sign everything. And we do it in a room full of people who laughed at me. Samuel leaned back in his chair and studied her face carefully. You're not doing this for revenge, are you? Lena thought about Daniel's words in the courtroom. You black women should feel lucky you even married into this family. She thought about Claire laughing, about Ethan saying she had never built anything. Then she said quietly, No, I'm doing this because men like Ethan and Daniel think they can ruin people and never answer for it. Samuel nodded slowly. He had spent his entire career putting men like that in prison. Michael will handle the federal side, Samuel said. Internal Affairs is building the case against Daniel and his family. All we need now is the signature. Lena looked out the window at the city lights coming on in the distance. In court, she said softly. They made me look like I had nothing. Samuel followed her gaze. That was the idea. Lena nodded. Good. Let them believe it a little longer. Because next week, in a ballroom full of investors, police officers, and reporters, Ethan Walker and Officer Daniel Reed were going to learn something they had never learned in their entire lives. What it felt like to lose everything at once. Samuel Carter had spent most of his life inside courtrooms, federal buildings, and government offices. He knew what corruption looked like. He knew what arrogance looked like. And after reviewing the files spread across his desk for the third time, he knew something else too. Ethan Walker and Officer Daniel Reed were not just careless. They were predictable. Samuel sat behind his desk, while Lena sat across from him, a folder open in front of her. Inside were copies of financial transfers, property records, shell company registrations, and a timeline Michael had built over 3 years of investigation. Samuel tapped one document with his finger. This is where Ethan started moving money, he said. 3 years ago. Small amounts at first, then larger. He started using business accounts to cover personal loans, then used new investor money to cover old losses. Lena nodded. A rolling cover. Exactly, Samuel said. He's not a genius criminal. He's a desperate one. That makes him easier to predict. On another page were photos, grainy surveillance stills, bank screenshots, printed emails. Samuel slid one photo across the desk. It showed Daniel Reed outside a nightclub, talking to a man Samuel had circled in red ink. "That man," Samuel said, "is a known bookmaker. Illegal sports betting. We have 3 separate cash deposits into Daniel's account that match nights he met this guy." Lena studied the photo. Daniel was laughing in it, relaxed, confident, like a man who had never been told no in his life. "Internal affairs?" Lena asked. "Already building their case," Samuel said. "But internal affairs moves slowly. The FBI moves when money crosses state lines. That's where Michael comes in." As if on cue, Samuel's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and then handed the phone to Lena. It was a message from Michael Carter. "Acquisition meeting confirmed. Walker thinks the buyer is a New York firm. He has no idea the holding company traces back to you. Reed's promotion paperwork is already in process. Everything is tied to next Friday." Lena read the message twice, then handed the phone back. "So it all happens the same night," she said. Samuel nodded. "The engagement party, the promotion celebration, and the acquisition announcement. He wants the whole city to see him win." Lena closed the folder slowly. "Then that's where he loses." Across town, Ethan Walker was giving Claire a tour of the house that used to belong to Lena too. Claire walked through the living room, already talking about renovations. "This wall has to go, and I want lighter floors. And the kitchen. Oh my God, we are completely redoing this kitchen." Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her with an amused smile. "You're spending money I don't have yet." Claire turned and looked at him. "You said the deal is basically done." "It is," Ethan said. "The acquisition meeting is next week. Once I sign, the new firm absorbs the debt. I step in as a partner, and everything resets." Claire walked over and put her arms around his neck. "And then we get married." Ethan smiled. "And then we get married." Claire hesitated for a moment, then asked, "There's no way Lena can come back for anything later, right? After you're richer, I mean." Ethan shook his head. "No. That's why the waiver mattered. Mutual waiver of undisclosed assets. She can't touch anything I build from here, and I can't touch anything she might have. But trust me, she doesn't have anything." Claire smiled, satisfied with that answer. "Good. I don't want her showing up 5 years from now asking for money." Ethan laughed. "Lena doesn't ask for money. That was always her problem. Too proud." Claire walked toward the staircase, already planning furniture in her head. "Well, pride doesn't pay mortgages." Ethan didn't answer that. He just looked around the house, imagining it full of new furniture, new photos, new memories that didn't include Lena. At the same time, in a federal office building downtown, Michael Carter sat in a conference room with 2 other agents and a woman from Internal Affairs. Michael stood and pointed to a board covered in photos and documents. "Ethan Walker," Michael said, pointing to Ethan's photo. "Financial fraud, wire fraud, possible money laundering. He's been moving investor money to cover business losses for at least 3 years." Then he pointed to Daniel Reed's photo. "Officer Daniel Reed. We have evidence of cash payments, dismissed complaints involving excessive force, and at least 2 incidents where body cam footage was lost. His family has influence in the department, which is why this hasn't gone anywhere internally." The Internal Affairs investigator, a woman named Captain Laura Jenkins, crossed her arms. "We've tried to build cases on the Reed family before. Witnesses stop talking. Reports get changed. Evidence disappears." Michael nodded. "That's why we don't go after them one at a time. We do it all at once. Financial crimes, public corruption, conspiracy." One of the other FBI agents asked. "And the trigger?" Michael picked up a folder and held it up. "The acquisition contract. Walker thinks he's selling his company. What he's actually doing is signing a personal guarantee tied to fraudulent financial statements. Once he signs, we move in." Captain Jenkins nodded slowly. "And Reed?" Michael replied. "Reed will be there that night. Promotion ceremony, remember? Cameras, press, city officials. He'll be in uniform. Captain Jenkins gave a small, satisfied smile. Good. Then everyone can watch him get arrested. Michael closed the folder. After next Friday, the Walker name and the Reed badge won't mean what they used to mean in this city. That evening, Lena sat alone in her apartment. The brown envelope Samuel had given her lying open on the table. Inside were copies of everything: bank transfers, property records, emails, company structures. On top of the stack was a photo of Ethan, Claire, and Daniel leaving the courthouse together, all three of them smiling. Lena picked up the photo and looked at it for a long time. 10 years of marriage, holidays, family dinners where people spoke around her instead of to her, jokes that stopped when she entered the room, comments about people from your background, Daniel asking her once if her neighborhood was safe at night. She put the photo back in the envelope. Then, she picked up her phone and called Samuel. "Do you remember what you told me the first time we met?" she asked when he answered. Samuel thought for a moment. "I told you, the law doesn't protect the good. It protects the prepared." Lena nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I'm prepared now." Samuel's voice was calm. "Good. Because next week, they're going to find out that winning in court and winning in life are two very different things." Lena hung up the phone and looked out the window at the city lights. In a week, Ethan Walker was going to walk into a ballroom thinking he was the most successful man in the room. Officer Daniel Reed was going to walk in wearing a uniform he believed made him untouchable. And Claire Whitmore was going to walk in wearing a ring she believed guaranteed her future. None of them understood that the night they were planning as a celebration had already been scheduled as an ending. Michael Carter did not believe in coincidences. After 12 years in federal investigations, he believed in patterns, pressure, and timing. And right now, all three were tightening around Ethan Walker and Officer Daniel Reed. Chapter 5 began on a Monday morning inside the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department, a place most officers pretended did not exist. Captain Laura Jenkins stood at the head of a long table, while a small group of investigators reviewed files spread out in front of them. Photos, complaint reports, bank records, body cam logs, names connected by lines and notes. At the center of the board was one name: Reed. Not just Daniel Reed, the Reed family. Captain Jenkins tapped the board with a pen. 4 generations in the department, she said. Grandfather, father, 2 uncles, Daniel, and his older brother Mark Reed, currently a lieutenant. If this goes wrong, half the department will say we're targeting a legacy family. Michael Carter leaned back in his chair. "We're not targeting a family. We're targeting crimes." Jenkins nodded. "Then let's talk about the crimes." She picked up the first file. Daniel Reed. 6 excessive force complaints. None sustained. 3 missing body cam recordings. 2 suspicious cash deposits that don't match his salary. Michael slid a document across the table. Those deposits match nights he met with a known bookmaker. "We have surveillance photos." "Michael," another investigator spoke. "What about the brother?" Jenkins opened a second file. Lieutenant Mark Reed signed off on 2 of the incident reports involving his brother. Both reports were later corrected, and the complaints disappeared. Michael nodded slowly. "So the brother protects Daniel, and the family name protects the brother." Jenkins looked at him. "Exactly." Michael stood and walked to the board. He placed a photo of Ethan Walker next to Daniel Reed's photo. "And this is where it becomes federal," Michael said. "Ethan Walker's company has been moving money through accounts connected to 2 shell companies. Those shell companies made consulting payments to a security firm." He placed another document on the board. "That security firm," he continued, "is owned by a retired police officer, former partner of Daniel Reed's father." The room went quiet. Jenkins exhaled slowly. "So the businessman is paying the cop's circle. The cop's family protects the cop, and everyone thinks it looks normal, because they all grew up together." Michael nodded. "That's how corruption works in smaller circles. It doesn't look like crime. It looks like favors." Across town, Ethan Walker was having a very different kind of meeting. He sat in a glass conference room with two men in suits, financial advisors he had hired to help him prepare for the acquisition deal he believed would save his company. "I just need this deal to close," Ethan said. "Once it closes, the debt gets absorbed, and I step into the new company with a clean slate." One of the advisors, a nervous man named Peter Lang, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Walker, I need to ask you directly, are there any liabilities not listed in the disclosure documents?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "No." Peter looked down at the paperwork. "Because if there are, and you sign a personal guarantee, those liabilities become your personal responsibility." Ethan smiled slightly. "You're worrying too much. The acquiring firm has done their due diligence. They know what they're buying." What Ethan did not know was that the acquiring firm was a holding company controlled entirely by Lena Walker. Back in the Internal Affairs office, Captain Jenkins closed another file. "We can move on, Reed, as soon as the federal warrant is signed. But you said we wait until Friday." Michael nodded. "We wait until Friday." "Why?" one of the investigators asked. "We already have enough for an arrest." Michael looked at the board again, Ethan's face, Daniel's face, the web of documents connecting them. "Because Friday," Michael said. "They'll all be in the same room." That evening, Claire Whitmore was sitting at a long dining table with Ethan and his mother, Margaret Walker. Margaret Walker was a tall, elegant woman in her 70s, who spoke in a calm, controlled voice, and had never liked Lena. "I just don't understand why she didn't fight harder," Margaret said, cutting her steak carefully. "If she had any pride at all, she would have tried to take something." Claire smiled politely. "I think she knew she couldn't win." Margaret nodded. "Walker men have always been providers. That's how this family works." Ethan raised his glass slightly. "Well, it's over now." Margaret looked at him. "And the business?" "Acquisition meeting is Friday," Ethan said. "After that, everything changes." Claire squeezed his hand under the table. "We were thinking maybe a fall wedding." Margaret smiled. "That would be lovely." Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Just make sure everything is finalized before the wedding. I don't want any surprises from the first wife." Ethan smirked. "There won't be any surprises." Lena signed a full waiver. She walked away with $50,000 and a used car. That chapter is closed. At that exact moment, across the city, Lena Walker sat in Samuel Carter's office again, while Michael stood near the window, reviewing a file. "This is the full financial map," Michael said, handing Lena a document. "Every account, every transfer, every shell company connected to Ethan." Lena looked at the numbers. "And after he signs?" Michael answered calmly. "After he signs, the fraud becomes provable, the debt becomes personal, and the company becomes yours." Samuel added quietly. "And Reed?" Michael looked at Samuel. "Internal Affairs will arrest Daniel Reed the same night. Federal charges will follow once we open the financial case tied to the security firm." Lena closed the file slowly. "So, on Friday night," she said, "Ethan loses his company, Daniel loses his badge, and Claire loses her future." Michael looked at her carefully. "Are you okay with that?" Lena thought for a moment. Then she said something very quietly. "They laughed at me in that courtroom like I was nothing," she said. "I'm not doing this because they laughed. I'm doing this because they thought they could destroy someone and call it success." Samuel nodded once. Michael said nothing. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Cars, lights, people going to dinner, going home, living their lives. And in 4 days, in a ballroom filled with music, champagne, and powerful people, 3 lives were going to collapse at the exact same time. Not by accident, by design. By Thursday morning, Ethan Walker believed he was about to become a very wealthy man. He stood in his office, looking out through the glass wall at the rows of desks where his employees worked. Most of them had no idea how close the company had come to collapsing. They only knew that an acquisition was coming and that acquisitions usually meant stability, new management, and sometimes bonuses. Ethan liked the way they looked at him when he walked through the office now. respectful, impressed, a little nervous, like he was a man who had survived something difficult and come out stronger. He adjusted his tie and walked into the conference room where his accountant and legal advisor were already waiting. Peter Lang, the same financial advisor from earlier in the week, looked tired. He had spent the last 2 nights reviewing numbers that did not make him comfortable. "Morning, Ethan," Peter said. "We need to go over the acquisition structure one more time before tomorrow." Ethan poured himself coffee and sat down. "You worry too much, Peter. That's why I hired you." Peter didn't smile. He opened a folder and pushed a document across the table. "This is the personal guarantee clause." Ethan barely looked at it. "Standard in deals like this." "Yes," Peter said carefully, "but usually not this broad." Ethan Seahill. "What does that mean?" "It means," Peter said, choosing his words slowly, "that if there are any financial discrepancies discovered after the acquisition, hidden debts, misrepresented assets, misused investor funds, you are personally liable. Not just the company. You." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "There are no discrepancies." Peter held his gaze. "Ethan, I'm not asking as your advisor right now. I'm asking as someone who doesn't want to see you lose everything. Is there anything I don't know about? Any accounts, loans, side deals, anything?" For the first time, Ethan looked slightly irritated. "I built this company from nothing. I know exactly what I'm doing. The acquiring firm knows my numbers. They've reviewed everything." What Ethan did not know was that the acquiring firm had indeed reviewed everything because the acquiring firm was controlled by Lena Walker. Peter nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. "All right," he said. "Then tomorrow should go smoothly." Across town, Claire Whitmore was at a jewelry store, having her ring cleaned for the engagement party. She held her hand under the bright light, watching the diamonds sparkle while the jeweler polished the band. "It's beautiful," the jeweler said. "Your fiancé has very good taste." Claire smiled. "Yes, he does." She took a photo of the ring and sent it to Ethan with a message. "Can't wait for tomorrow night. After this, everything changes." Ethan replied a minute later. "Yes. After tomorrow, we're set for life." Claire smiled at the screen, but her smile faded slightly when she opened another message thread, this one with a friend. She typed, "He's closing the deal tomorrow. Big acquisition. After that, I'm marrying him as fast as possible. I am not going back to being broke ever again." She hit send, locked her phone, and looked at her ring again. At the same time, in a federal parking garage, Michael Carter sat in his car reading the final operations plan. Samuel Carter opened the passenger door and got in slowly, holding a folder. "Internal affairs is ready," Samuel said. "They'll move on Daniel Reed once the federal warrant is active." Michael nodded. "Good." Samuel handed him the folder. "This is the final financial summary. Once Ethan signs that contract tomorrow night, it becomes a confession in everything but name." Michael flipped through the pages. Wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, he said quietly. He signed his divorce papers thinking that was the worst document he'd sign this year. Samuel looked straight ahead through the windshield. Most men like Ethan think the most dangerous room in the world is a courtroom. They're wrong. Michael closed the folder. It's a ballroom. That evening, Lena stood alone in her apartment, looking at the red suit hanging on the back of her bedroom door. It was simple, elegant, and impossible to ignore. She had bought it 3 years ago and never worn it. Not yet. Her phone rang. It was Michael. "Everything is ready," he said when she answered. "Tomorrow night, Ethan signs the acquisition agreement. 10 minutes later, Internal Affairs takes Reed. 15 minutes after that, we serve the federal warrant on Ethan." Lena was quiet for a moment. "And the investors? They'll be protected," Michael said. "Your acquisition covers their losses. Their retirement funds are safe." Lena nodded slowly. That part mattered to her more than Ethan, more than Claire, more than Daniel. "Michael," she said, "do you remember the hospital?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Every day. I didn't help you so you would do this for me," Lena said. I know, Michael replied. You helped us when you didn't have much. This isn't a favor. This is my job. The fact that it helps you too. That's just how the world works sometimes. After the call ended, Lena walked over to the window and looked out at the city. Tomorrow night, Ethan Walker would walk into a ballroom, believing he was selling his failing company and becoming a partner in a larger firm. Claire Whitmore would walk in believing she was about to marry a wealthy man. Officer Daniel Reed would walk in wearing a uniform, expecting to be congratulated and promoted. Samuel Carter would walk in knowing exactly how the night would end. Michael Carter would walk in with a federal warrant in his jacket, and Lena Walker would walk in last. Not as a victim, not as a divorced woman with $50,000 and a used car, but as the person who now owned Ethan Walker's debt, Ethan Walker's company, and the evidence that would end Officer Daniel Reed's career. In the courtroom, they had laughed at her because they thought she had nothing. Tomorrow night, in a room full of powerful people, they were going to learn how dangerous a quiet person with nothing left to lose could be. Friday arrived with the kind of cold, clear evening that made the city lights look sharper than usual. By 6 o'clock, the ballroom of the Lakeshore Grand Hotel was already glowing with warm light, polished glass, and the low hum of expensive conversations. Ethan Walker stood near the center of the room, shaking hands, smiling, accepting congratulations from people who believed they were watching a man at the peak of his career. A banner near the stage read, "Walker Financial Strategic Acquisition Announcement." To most people in the room, it looked like a celebration of success. Claire Whitmore stood beside him in a dark blue evening dress, her diamond ring catching the light every time she lifted her champagne glass. She had spent 2 hours getting ready for this night: hair, makeup, dress, shoes, because in her mind, this was the night her real life began. "You nervous?" Claire asked softly, leaning toward Ethan. "Not even a little," Ethan replied. "By the end of tonight, the company is sold. The debt is gone, and I start a new position Monday morning." Claire smiled. "And we set a wedding date." Ethan smiled back. "And we set a wedding date." Across the room, Officer Daniel Reed stood in full dress uniform, his badge polished, his posture straight, surrounded by other officers and a few city officials. Tonight wasn't just Ethan's night. It was Daniel's too. His promotion to sergeant had been quietly approved, and the official announcement would happen during the same event. 2 Walker family victories in one night. Daniel laughed with a group of officers. "I'm telling you," he said. "Next year, Lieutenant. Watch." One of the officers nodded toward Ethan. "Your cousin's doing pretty well too." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, we take care of our own." At the bar on the far side of the ballroom, Michael Carter stood alone with a glass of club soda, wearing a dark suit that made him look like any other corporate guest. No one looking at him would think he was FBI. That was the point. He spoke quietly into the small microphone hidden under his collar. "All units in position?" A voice answered softly in his earpiece. "Internal Affairs team is in the service corridor, waiting for your signal." Another voice came through. "Federal team is ready. Warrant is signed." Michael looked across the room at Ethan, laughing with a group of investors. Then he looked at Daniel, standing proudly in uniform. "Stand by," Michael said quietly. Near the entrance of the ballroom, Samuel Carter stood with Lena Walker. Samuel Carter, the retired federal prosecutor who had once lost everything and been helped by a young woman who refused to let his son die because of money, looked at Lena carefully. "You don't have to go in there," Samuel said. "Michael and the federal team can handle everything." Lena looked through the open doors into the ballroom. She could see Ethan, Claire, Daniel, all of them smiling. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." She was wearing the red suit. Not bright red, not loud, but the kind of deep red that made people look twice without knowing why. It was the color of confidence, of control, of someone who did not ask for permission to enter a room. Samuel nodded once. "Then let's go remind them who you are." Inside the ballroom, Ethan stepped up onto the stage and tapped the microphone. The room slowly quieted. Thank you all for coming tonight, Ethan began, smiling confidently. This has been a big year. A lot of changes. Some of you know I recently finalized my divorce, which, while unfortunate, allowed me to focus fully on the future of Walker Financial. A few people chuckled politely. Ethan continued. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Walker Financial will be acquired by a major investment group, and I will be joining the new firm as a senior partner overseeing regional operations. Applause filled the room. Claire clapped the loudest. Daniel nodded proudly from across the room. Ethan smiled and gestured toward a table near the stage where a set of documents and a pen were waiting. The representative of the acquiring firm is here tonight, and will be signing the final agreement in just a few minutes. Michael Carter, still standing near the bar, touched his earpiece lightly. Get ready, he said quietly. At the back of the ballroom, the doors opened. Some people turned just out of curiosity. Others didn't notice at all, but Ethan noticed, because Lena Walker walked into the room. She walked in beside Samuel Carter, calm, steady, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Conversations near the entrance faded as people recognized her. The ex-wife, the woman from the divorce, the woman everyone thought had disappeared quietly with $50,000 and a used car. Claire saw her and froze. What is she doing here? She whispered. Daniel turned and frowned. You've got to be kidding me. Ethan's smile faded slightly as Lena walked closer to the stage. Whispers began to spread across the room. Isn't that his ex-wife? Why is she here? Who invited her? Lena and Samuel stopped a few feet from the stage. Samuel said nothing. He simply looked at Ethan the way a man looks at a chessboard when he knows the game is already over. Ethan forced a small laugh into the microphone. Well, I didn't expect to see you here tonight, Lena. Lena didn't answer him. She just looked at the table where the contract sat. Then she looked at Ethan. You should read the contract carefully before you sign it, she said calmly. Some people in the audience laughed, thinking it was an awkward joke. Ethan smiled tightly. I have lawyers for that. Lena nodded once. Yes, I know. Michael Carter stepped away from the bar and began walking slowly toward the stage. In the service hallway, internal affairs officers placed their hands on the handcuffs hanging from their belts. Near the side entrance, 2 FBI agents waited for the signal. On the stage, Ethan picked up the pen, and for the first time that night, Lena Walker smiled. Ethan Walker held the pen in his hand, smiling at the audience, waiting for the polite applause to settle down. From the stage, everything looked exactly the way he had imagined it. Investors, city officials, police officers, business partners, and Claire standing near the front, looking at him like he was the center of the world. Only Lena was out of place. She stood a few feet from the stage, in a dark red suit, calm, silent, watching him the way a person watches a storm they already know is coming. You should read the contract carefully before you sign it, Lena had said. Ethan forced a small laugh into the microphone. I have lawyers for that. There were a few polite laughs in the room, the kind people give when they don't understand what's happening but assume the man on stage is still in control. Ethan looked down at the contract, flipping the pages quickly. He had already reviewed versions of this document all week. Acquisition price, debt absorption, executive position, personal guarantee clause, standard language. His lawyer had told him everything was fine. He signed the first page, then the second, then the last. He placed the pen down and turned back to the microphone. And with that, he said, smiling again, Walker Financial begins an exciting new chapter. Applause filled the room. Claire clapped, beaming. Daniel nodded proudly from across the room, his hands folded in front of his dress uniform. Then Lena spoke again. Congratulations, she said calmly. You just signed over everything you own. The applause faded, not all at once, but in a slow, confused ripple across the room. Ethan looked at her, smiling like she had made a strange joke. I think you misunderstand how acquisitions work. Lena shook her head slightly. No, Ethan. I understand exactly how this acquisition works. She turned slightly and looked toward the back of the room. "Mr. Carter?" she said. Samuel Carter stepped forward and walked toward the stage. Some of the older people in the room recognized him immediately. Former federal prosecutor, the man who had put a city councilman and 2 corporate executives in prison 15 years ago. Whispers began again. "Why is Samuel Carter here? What is this?" Samuel stepped onto the stage slowly, like a man who had done this many times before and was never in a hurry. Ethan's smile was gone now. "What is this?" he asked, his voice lower. Samuel looked at him calmly. "Mr. Walker, you just signed a personal guarantee tied to financial statements that your company submitted to secure this acquisition." "Yes," Ethan said. "That's how deals work." Samuel nodded. "Yes, that is how deals work. And when those financial statements are fraudulent, that is how federal prison works." The room went completely silent. Claire looked from Ethan to Samuel to Lena, her smile gone now. "Ethan, what is he talking about?" Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is ridiculous." Lena spoke again, her voice calm, steady, carrying across the room without effort. "The acquiring company is a holding firm called Redbridge Capital." Ethan nodded. "Yes, that's the firm." Lena held his eyes. "I own Redbridge Capital." For a second, Ethan didn't react at all. It was like his brain had heard the sentence but refused to accept it. "That's not funny," Claire said quickly. "I'm not joking," Lena replied. Samuel placed a folder on the table next to the signed contract. "Redbridge Capital completed a full forensic audit before the acquisition," he said. "We found evidence of wire fraud, falsified financial statements, and the use of investor funds to cover personal debt." Ethan shook his head. No, that's not." At that moment, Michael Carter stepped forward, walking through the crowd toward the stage, holding a leather folder in his hand. He stopped at the edge of the stage and looked up at Ethan. "Ethan Walker," Michael said, his voice clear and calm. "I'm Special Agent Michael Carter with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Do not leave the stage." You could feel the air leave the room. Claire took a step back. "FBI?" she whispered. Daniel Reed immediately started moving toward the stage. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. Michael didn't look at Daniel yet. He kept his eyes on Ethan. "You are being investigated for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. The documents you signed tonight include a personal guarantee based on those fraudulent statements." Ethan's face had gone pale. "This is a setup," he said. "This is a setup." Lena looked at him and said quietly, "No, Ethan, this is an audit." Daniel reached the front of the stage. "You can't just walk in here and accuse people." Before he could finish, another voice spoke behind him. "Officer Daniel Reed." Daniel turned. Captain Laura Jenkins from Internal Affairs stood a few feet behind him, holding a badge case in one hand. "We need to speak with you," she said. Daniel stared at her. "Now is not the time." Jenkins' voice did not change. "Now is exactly the time. You are being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into multiple internal affairs complaints, including evidence tampering and unlawful use of force." Daniel looked around the room, at the officers he knew, at the city officials, at Ethan standing frozen on stage. "This is a joke," Daniel said. "You're doing this here? In front of everyone?" Jenkins replied. "You wore the uniform here, Officer Reed. We assumed you wanted to be seen." 2 internal affairs officers stepped forward. At the same time, Michael opened the folder in his hand and removed a document. "Ethan Walker," he said. "This is a federal warrant for seizure of financial records and assets connected to Walker Financial. You will be required to come with us for questioning." Claire looked at Ethan, her voice shaking now. "Ethan, tell me this isn't real." Ethan didn't answer. He was staring at Lena. "You planned this," he said quietly. Lena met his eyes. "You planned this, Ethan. 3 years ago when you started moving money that didn't belong to you. I just finished it." Around them, the room was completely silent. Investors, police officers, city officials all watching the same thing happen at the same time. The promotion celebration was over. The acquisition celebration was over. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Walker was the one standing in a room where everyone was looking at him like he had just lost everything. Ethan Walker did not move. He stood on the stage, staring at Lena as if the entire room had disappeared and there were only two people left in the world, the woman he thought he had erased and the man he thought he still was. "You planned this," he said again. But this time his voice was quieter, less certain. Lena didn't raise her voice. She didn't step closer. She simply stood there and looked at him. "No, Ethan. I prepared for this. There's a difference." Special Agent Michael Carter stepped up onto the stage, holding the federal warrant in one hand. "Mr. Walker, I need you to come with us," he said calmly. "You are not under arrest at this moment, but you are the subject of a federal investigation involving financial fraud and misappropriation of investor funds." Claire grabbed Ethan's arm. "Say something," she whispered urgently. "Tell them this is wrong." Ethan looked at her, but he didn't seem to see her the same way anymore. A week ago, Claire had looked like the future. Now she looked like a problem standing too close to him. "This is a business dispute," Ethan said, trying to regain control of his voice. "This is about contracts. You don't bring the FBI to a business dispute." Michael didn't react. It stopped being a business dispute when investor money started moving through shell companies and into personal accounts. Around the room, people had stopped pretending not to watch. Conversations had died. Glasses were being set down slowly. Phones were being pulled out quietly. Near the back of the room, two internal affairs officers had stepped up beside Daniel Reed. "You need to come with us, Officer Reed," Captain Laura Jenkins said. Daniel's face had turned red, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're doing this because of him?" he said, pointing toward Ethan. "This is about his business, not me." Jenkins held his gaze. "This is about missing evidence, falsified reports, and money that showed up in your accounts that doesn't match your salary." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're trying to embarrass me. In front of everyone," Jenkins replied. "No, Officer Reed. You embarrassed yourself. We're just writing the report." Two internal affairs officers gently but firmly took Daniel by the arm. Not handcuffed yet, but not free either. On the stage, Ethan looked out at the room at investors who now looked nervous, at city officials who looked like they wanted to leave, at police officers who were pretending not to know Daniel. "This is harassment," Ethan said. "Lena, tell them this is just a business deal." Lena finally stepped closer to the stage. She didn't climb it. She didn't need to. Everyone could hear her. "You remember what you said to me in court?" she asked him. "You said I didn't know how to win in the real world." Ethan didn't answer. Lena continued. "You were right about one thing. Court isn't where people like me win. Court is where people like you think you've already won." She looked around the room, at all the people who had laughed at her, ignored her, believed the story Ethan had told about who she was. "The real world," she said, "is where numbers don't lie, bank transfers don't lie, signed contracts don't lie." Michael stepped forward and placed another document on the table next to the acquisition contract. "These are the transfer records," he said. "Investor funds moved into shell accounts. Shell accounts tied to properties and personal expenses." Samuel Carter spoke next, his voice calm but carrying across the silent ballroom. "Mr. Walker, when you signed that acquisition agreement tonight, you personally guaranteed the accuracy of every financial statement your company submitted. That means the debt is now yours. Personally. Not the company's. Yours." Claire looked at Ethan like she was seeing him for the first time. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. Ethan didn't answer her. Samuel did. "It means the company is no longer his. The debt is." Claire slowly let go of Ethan's arm. "You said the company was worth millions," she said. Ethan still didn't answer. Lena spoke again, and this time her voice was softer than before. Not angry, not loud, Just certain. You built everything on loans, Ethan, she said. Then you used other people's retirement money to keep the business alive. You didn't build a company. You built a lie. Ethan looked at her like he wanted to say something that could still fix this, still control this, still make this go away. But there are moments in life when a person realizes the story they have been telling themselves is over. This was that moment for Ethan Walker. Michael stepped closer. Mr. Walker, we need you to come with us now. Ethan looked out at the room one more time. No one was smiling anymore. The investors looked angry. The city officials looked nervous. The police officers were looking anywhere but at Daniel Reed. Claire looked at Ethan for a long moment, then asked the only question that mattered to her. Do you still have money? She asked quietly. Ethan stared at her. That question hurt more than the FBI, more than the contracts, more than Lena standing there in red like a judge who didn't need a courtroom. Answer me, Claire said, her voice shaking now. Do you still have money? Ethan swallowed, but he didn't say anything. Claire stepped back like the answer had been spoken anyway. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, you don't. She looked at Lena, then back at Ethan, and whatever love she had been pretending to feel disappeared from her face like it had never been there at all. I'm not going down with you, she said quietly. I didn't sign anything. Then she turned and walked away, her heels echoing loudly in the silent ballroom as she headed for the exit, leaving Ethan standing alone on the stage. Daniel Reed, across the room, was being led toward a side door by Internal Affairs. This isn't over, he shouted. You hear me? This isn't over, Captain Jenkins replied. It is for tonight. On the stage, Michael gently took Ethan's arm. We're leaving now. As Ethan was led off the stage, he passed Lena. For a moment, they stood face to face one last time. You could have just left, Ethan said quietly. You could have taken the money and disappeared. Lena looked at him and said the last thing she would ever say to him as his wife, as his partner, or as someone he could ever hurt again. You thought I wanted your money, she said. I wanted your name on the paper. Then Michael led Ethan Walker out of the ballroom, past the investors, past the city officials, past the police officers, and out into the cold night where the rest of his life was waiting for him. Inside the ballroom, no one was celebrating anymore. The ballroom did not return to normal after Ethan was taken out. No one went back to drinking. No one went back to celebrating. Conversations restarted, but in low voices, in small groups, with people glancing toward Lena and Samuel Carter, as if they were trying to understand how the entire night had turned inside out in less than 10 minutes. On the stage, the acquisition banner still hung behind the table where Ethan had signed the contract. The pen he had used was still lying there, next to the folder Samuel had placed down earlier. Everything looked the same as it had 20 minutes ago, but nothing was the same anymore. Lena stood near the front of the room, very still, while people began to look at her differently. Not like the ex-wife, not like the quiet woman from the courtroom. Now they were trying to figure out who she really was. An older man in a gray suit, one of the investors, approached her slowly. Mrs. Walker, he said, his voice careful. Is it true that your firm now owns Walker Financial? Yes, Lena said calmly. My firm acquired the company this evening. The man nodded slowly. My retirement fund was invested with Ethan's company. I know, Lena said. Your fund, and 6 others. Teachers, municipal workers, transit employees. That's why I bought the company instead of letting it collapse. The man looked at her for a long moment. So, our money is safe? Yes, Lena said. Your money is safe. The company will be restructured. New management. Independent oversight. No one else will lose their retirement because of this. The man's shoulders dropped slightly, like a weight had just been taken off him. Thank you, he said quietly. Word spread quickly after that conversation. Not revenge. Not a scandal. A takeover. A risque. Across the room, Captain Laura Jenkins finished speaking with 2 city officials, then walked over to Lena. Internal Affairs has Reed, Jenkins said quietly. His brother is already calling lawyers. This is going to get loud. Samuel Carter joined them. Let it get loud, he said. It's time. Jenkins looked at Lena. You understand what's going to happen next, right? The department is going to try to protect itself. The press is going to dig into everything. Your name will be in every paper by morning. Lena nodded. I know. Jenkins studied her for a moment. Most people in your position would have stayed anonymous. Lena's answer was simple. Most people weren't the one he chose to humiliate in court. Across the ballroom, Claire Whitmore stood near the exit, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. I don't care what you heard, she whispered. Find out what happens to the house. My name isn't on anything yet, right? I need to know what I'm responsible for and what I'm not. She listened for a moment, then said, No, I'm not married to him yet. That's the point. She hung up and looked back across the room at Lena. Their eyes met for just a second. Claire looked away first. Michael Carter walked back into the ballroom after escorting Ethan out to the federal car. He walked straight toward Lena and Samuel. It's done, Michael said. He's in the car. He'll be questioned tonight. His accounts are frozen as of 30 minutes ago. Samuel nodded once. And Reed? Internal Affairs is processing him now, Michael said. Once we connect the financial payments from the security firm, we add conspiracy. Lena looked at Michael. The investors know their money is safe. Michael nodded. Good. That matters. Samuel looked around the room. You should say something, he told Lena quietly. She frowned slightly. Say what? Samuel nodded toward the people still standing around, confused, shocked, whispering. Right now, there are about 100 people in this room who watched a man lose everything. If you don't tell them why, they'll make up their own story, and their story won't be the truth. Lena thought about that for a moment. Then she nodded and walked toward the stage. The room slowly quieted again as people noticed her moving. Conversations stopped. Glasses were set down. Even the hotel staff paused. Lena stepped onto the stage, standing in the same place Ethan had stood less than an hour earlier. She did not pick up the microphone right away. When she finally did, she didn't raise her voice. My name is Lena Walker, she said. Some of you met me tonight as Ethan Walker's ex-wife. She paused, letting the room settle. What you saw tonight was not revenge, she continued. It was an investigation that started 3 years ago, when financial records showed that money from retirement funds was being moved to cover business losses and personal debt. People listened very carefully now. I tried to handle this quietly at first, Lena said, but when I realized how much money was missing and how many people were going to be hurt when the company collapsed, I contacted people who could investigate legally. She glanced toward Michael and Samuel briefly, then back at the audience. The company has been acquired, and the retirement funds connected to it are protected. The employees will be paid. The company will continue operating under new management. An older woman near the front of the room raised her hand slightly. You could have just exposed him, she said. Why buy the company? Lena answered her honestly. Because if I had just exposed him, the company would have collapsed, and innocent people would have lost everything. This way, the people who did nothing wrong keep their jobs and their retirement. The only people who lose are the people who broke the law. The room was completely silent now. Lena looked around at all the faces, watching her people who had ignored her before, people who had laughed in the courtroom, people who had believed Ethan's version of the story. Then she said the one thing she had been holding on to since the day of the divorce. In court, I was treated like I was walking away with nothing, she said. But sometimes the person who walks away with nothing is the only person who can afford to tell the truth. No one clapped right away. Not because they didn't want to, but because they were realizing they had been in the room the whole time and had completely misunderstood who the most powerful person in the story was. And it wasn't the man with the company. It was the quiet woman he thought he had erased. The ballroom slowly began to empty, but no one left the way they had arrived. People left quietly, in pairs or small groups, speaking in low voices, checking their phones, already seeing the first news alerts appear. A few investors approached Samuel Carter for business cards. Two city officials left through a side door without speaking to anyone. 3 police officers walked out together, their faces tight, their voices tense. Reputation moved fast in a city like this, faster than truth. But tonight, for once, truth had arrived at the same time. Lena stepped down from the stage after her speech. For a moment, she stood alone near one of the round tables, her hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was beginning to fade, leaving behind a quiet, heavy exhaustion. Michael Carter walked over to her, loosening his tie slightly. "You did the right thing up there," he said. "Most people would have made it about revenge. You made it about the investors and the employees. That's going to matter when this hits the news." Lena gave a small nod. It was always about them. Ethan just made himself the center of a story that was never really about him. Michael studied her for a moment. "He asked about you in the car." Lena looked at him. "What did he say?" "He said he underestimated you," Michael replied. "Then he asked how long you had been planning this." Lena was quiet for a few seconds. "Tell him the truth," she said. "I started planning the day I realized he thought I was too stupid to understand the numbers." Across the room, Samuel Carter was speaking with Captain Laura Jenkins again. The two of them stood near the stage, looking like two people who had spent most of their lives dealing with the aftermath of other people's bad decisions. "The department is going to try to distance itself from Reed," Jenkins was saying. "They'll say he acted alone." Samuel nodded. "That's why the financial trail matters. Money connects people in ways loyalty never does." Jenkins crossed her arms. "His brother is already calling this a political attack." Samuel gave a small, tired smile. "Every man who gets caught says it's political." Jenkins looked over at Lena. She knew exactly what she was doing. Samuel followed her gaze. "Yes," he said. She did. Near the exit, Claire Whitmore was still standing alone, her phone in her hand, her expression tight and angry instead of frightened now. When she saw Lena walking toward the coat check, Claire stepped into her path. "I want to know something," Claire said. Lena stopped. Claire crossed her arms. "When were you going to tell him? That you owned the company?" "I wasn't," Lena said calmly. Claire frowned. "So this whole thing, this whole time, you were just waiting?" "Yes," Lena said. Claire shook her head. "You ruined his life." Lena looked at her for a long moment before answering. "No. Ethan ruined his own life. I just made sure he couldn't ruin anyone else's." Claire's jaw tightened. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Lena's voice remained calm. "No. I think I'm someone who read the contracts." Claire didn't have an answer for that. She looked down at the ring on her finger for a moment, then back at Lena. "What happens to the house?" she asked quietly. "The house was tied to his personal guarantees," Lena said. "So were the cars. And most of the accounts." Claire's face changed again, the reality settling in piece by piece. "So he really has nothing," Lena answered honestly. "He has exactly what he built." Claire let out a short, bitter laugh. "I knew he was stressed about money, but I didn't know it was like this." Lena tilted her head slightly. "You asked him if he still had money before you asked if he was okay." Claire didn't deny it. After a moment, Claire said, "You know what the difference between you and me is?" Lena waited. Claire said, "You married him when he had nothing, and believed in what he could become. I met him when he had everything, and believed in what he could give me." Lena considered that for a moment. "That's not the difference between us," she said. Claire frowned. "Then what is?" Lena answered quietly. "I would have stayed if he had lost everything. You left while he was still standing on the stage." Claire looked like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She just turned and walked out of the ballroom, her heels echoing across the marble floor until the doors closed behind her. Lena watched her go, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with a kind of quiet understanding. Some people loved people. Some people loved what people had. Samuel walked over and handed Lena her coat. "It's going to be a long few weeks," he said. "Press, lawyers, restructuring the company, testimony." Lena slipped her arms into the coat. "I know." Samuel looked at her carefully. Do you regret any of it? Lena thought about the courtroom, Daniel's voice, Ethan's smile when she signed the divorce papers, Claire laughing. Then she thought about the investors tonight asking if their retirement money was safe. No, she said. I regret that I didn't see who he was sooner, but I don't regret what I did after I found out. Michael joined them near the exit. The car is ready, he said. I'll walk you out. The three of them walked through the hotel lobby together. Most people didn't recognize Michael. A few people recognized Samuel. No one stopped Lena. But many people looked at her. Some with curiosity. Some with respect. Some with something like guilt. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Michael opened the car door for Lena. But before she got in, she looked back up at the hotel where the ballroom lights were still glowing on the upper floor. 3 years, she said quietly. Samuel nodded. 3 years is a long time to wait. Lena looked up at the windows for another moment. No, she said. 3 years is a long time to pretend you don't see the truth. She got into the car, and as the door closed and the car pulled away from the hotel, the last part of Ethan Walker's old life disappeared behind her in the rearview mirror. The news broke the next morning. By 6 a.m., every major local news station had the same headline. Financial executive under federal investigation. Police sergeant placed on leave amid corruption probe. Mystery investor acquires Walker Financial. By 8 a.m., Lena Walker's name was no longer a mystery. Michael Carter stood in a federal conference room watching the morning news on a wall-mounted television. Ethan Walker's photo appeared on the screen, followed by Daniel Reed's police portrait, followed by a photo of Lena entering the ballroom in her red suit the night before. A reporter spoke clearly into the camera. Sources confirm that the acquisition of Walker Financial was completed last night by a private investment firm led by financial analyst Lena Walker, the former spouse of Ethan Walker. Court records show the couple finalized their divorce just days before the acquisition. One of the agents in the room let out a low whistle. That's cold, he said quietly. Michael didn't smile. That's patient, he replied. Across town, Lena sat in Samuel Carter's office again, the same office where the entire plan had been mapped out over the past 3 years. The morning paper lay open on the desk, her name printed in bold letters for the first time in her life. Samuel handed her a cup of coffee. You're going to get calls all day, he said. Reporters, lawyers, board members. Probably a few people who suddenly remember they were always very nice to you. Lena gave a small, tired smile. I don't need new friends. Samuel sat across from her. Walker Financial's board voted this morning. They agreed to your restructuring plan. Lena nodded. Employees keep their jobs. Pensions are protected. Executive salaries cut. Independent oversight. Samuel smiled slightly. You just became the most unpopular person in 2 different country clubs. I can live with that, Lena said. Samuel studied her for a moment. Michael told me. Ethan asked about you again this morning. Lena looked up. What did he want to know? He wanted to know if you ever loved him, Samuel said. Lena didn't answer right away. She looked down at her coffee, watching the steam rise slowly. Yes, she said finally. I did. That was the problem. Samuel nodded slowly. He understood that answer better than most people would. At the same time, in a federal holding room, Ethan Walker sat at a metal table, wearing the same suit from the night before. He looked like a man who had not slept. Michael Carter walked into the room and placed a folder on the table in front of him. This is a list of accounts, properties, and transfers connected to your company, Michael said. We're giving you the opportunity to cooperate before formal charges are filed. Ethan didn't open the folder. He just looked at Michael. Did she hate me that much? He asked. Michael pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. This isn't about hate, he said. This is about money you moved that didn't belong to you. Ethan laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You know what the worst part is? Michael didn't answer. The worst part is that she was always the smartest person in the room, Ethan said. I just didn't like that feeling. So I started pretending she wasn't. He finally opened the folder and looked at the documents inside. I thought she needed me, he said. Turns out I was the one who needed her. Michael closed the folder gently. Mr. Walker, this is the part where you decide whether the rest of your life is a long fight or a shorter one. Ethan nodded slowly, but he didn't say anything else. Later that afternoon, Lena stood inside the Walker Financial Office building, now her building, looking out at the same floor where Ethan had stood just days earlier, believing he was about to become richer than he had ever been. Employees watched her carefully as she walked through the office. Some looked nervous. Some looked curious. Some looked relieved. She stopped near the center of the room and spoke to them without a microphone, just in a clear, calm voice. My name is Lena Walker, she said. I know the last few days have been confusing and probably frightening. I want you to understand 3 things. People slowly stood from their desks and turned toward her. First, the company is not closing. No one here is losing their job because of what happened. You could see shoulders relax. Second, the retirement funds connected to this company are protected. No teacher, no city worker, no driver, no secretary is going to lose their future because of decisions made at the top. Some people nodded. One woman near the back wiped her eyes. And third, Lena said, this company is going to start telling the truth in its numbers, in its contracts, and in its promises. That's how we're going to rebuild. One of the older employees raised his hand slightly. Why are you doing this? He asked. Most people would have just taken the company and sold it. Lena thought about the courtroom, the laughter, Daniel's voice, Ethan's smile when she signed the papers. Then she thought about the hospital bill she had paid 20 years ago for a boy she barely knew, about Samuel's promise, about Michael keeping that promise. Because a long time ago, she said, someone helped me when they didn't have to. And I learned that if you have the chance to stop something bad from happening to a lot of people, you're supposed to take that chance. She looked around the office one more time. I'm not here because I wanted revenge, she said. I'm here because I refused to let a lie become a legacy. That evening, Lena left the building after most of the employees had gone home. The city was quiet, the sky already dark, the lights reflecting off the windows of the buildings around her. Samuel was waiting by the car. Well, he said, it's done. Lena looked up at the building one last time. No, she said quietly. Now it starts. Samuel smiled slightly. You know, most people spend their whole lives trying to become powerful. Lena looked at him. I never wanted to be powerful. Samuel opened the car door for her. Then, what did you want? Lena thought for a moment before answering. I wanted to make sure that when someone like Ethan or Daniel tries to decide who matters and who doesn't, she said, they're wrong. She got into the car, and as they drove away, the building that used to belong to Ethan Walker and the life that used to belong to Lena Walker stood behind them, no longer a symbol of what she had lost, but of what she had rebuilt. And in the end, the people who laughed in the courtroom learned something they would never forget. The most dangerous person in the room is not the loudest one. It's the one who is quietly making sure the truth wins in the end.